New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
New Thought Media Network is pleased to present The Inclusive Church, Ideas and Resources for Leaders of Multicultural Ministries. The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Tuesdays at 12 noon Mountain Time. Join Tracy and her guests as they go deep and share practical tips and resources you can use in your ministry. And now let's explore the Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown.
Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here, and it is time for the Inclusive Church right here on the New Thought Media Network. I love every week that I get the opportunity to take a few minutes and really focus in on this commitment to be inclusive in our spiritual communities. And I love it when I have guests that make me excited about the conversation that is going to unfold. And that is like today, I could hardly sit still in my because it is just so exciting for me to have a conversation with my special guests. And I'm going to tell you about them in just a minute. But first, I want to do the two reminders that I always do at the top of the show. One, it's Inclusive Church. I'm not talking about property. I am talking about people. And so if the pandemic didn't remind us of anything else related to our spiritual communities, it reminded us that the church is the people who come together to read and study and support each other and pray and learn. And that's church. So I'm reclaiming church from thinking about a building or a piece of property to focusing on the people. And then the second thing is that throughout the conversation today and every week, you hear me and my guests talk about what leaders in spiritual communities should know or might keep in mind. And every now and then someone will private chat me or will send me direct message, and they'll say, oh, I watched the show, but I turned it off because you were saying that it was for leaders and I'm not a minister. So anyone who knows me knows that I'm pretty famous for saying you don't have to be a minister to have a ministry. But even beyond that, while I hope all ministers are leaders, ministers would not be able to have successful ministries if there were not leaders who were serving on the board, volunteering, donating money, bringing more people in, all of the things that happen for our spiritual communities to grow. So, having said that, are you ready? We are going to have a conversation today about what it means and what it takes to focus on anti-racism to educate people about racism in a way that is in alignment with spiritual principle, and requires action and learning. And there is no group that I am aware of in the US who has done more than have I been saying this word for 25 years? But now I'm on camera and it won't come out of my mouth. There's no group that I know who has done more than the Ujima Ministry at Center for Spiritual Awareness, CSA, in Sacramento, California. And so today I get to introduce to you or remind you of the work that they're doing by having a conversation with three people, not one, not two, three people. And so I'm just going to grab one random fact about each of them. And then when I bring them on, if they want to add anything else, then we'll do that. So let's start with Gretchen Jung. Gretchen may be tiny. And you may think she's quiet at first, as I did when I first met her. But this tiny woman takes up enough space for 10 people in the room labeled anti-racism teacher, facilitator, student, and guide. I don't know. I really don't know anyone who demonstrates more commitment to this topic than Gretchen. Yeah. Also with us will be Reverend Brynde Lambert, and she is licensed and I think ordained, correct me, I should have asked you, interfaith minister, and has been also a CSL licensed practitioner for many, 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 many years. And Reverend Dr. Georgia Prescott, the founding minister at CSA. I'd like to use the word retired, but I think she's working full-time with the Ujima Ministry and just letting someone else do all of the stuff that it takes to run a church. And Dr. Georgia is well known throughout the Science of Mind movement and CSL for being an outspoken advocate for racial equity and a person who walks her talk on this and any other topic that she is championing. So, hey, everybody, welcome in. Let's see if I can get you all on screen at the same time.
Yes.
Yay. Welcome, welcome. So is there anything else you want people to know about you, just kind of in general, your background? Because we're going to dive in pretty quickly to the inclusive part.
I'm good.
Head shaking, yes.
Yeah. I'd like people to know that my pronouns are she and her or they. And I'm on the unceded land of the Nisenan people here in Carmichael, California. So I'd like to lift that up.
Great. Thank you so much.
I'm good.
I hear a voice.
It was Gretchen. That introduction's a little over the top, but I'll try to live up to it.
So I am noticing with all four of us on the screen that having our individual names and titles is a little busy. So I'm removing them. Good. And then I'll just periodically run a banner that has that information. And we've got some people who have said their hellos in the chat. Hey, Anita, so glad you're here today. And Ms. Jordan, I'm so glad you're here. And anyone else, if you want to dial in, because today we are definitely international, since Tendai is currently dialing in from Bahia in Brazil. If you'd also like us to say hello to you and welcome you, please put your name and if you want, where you are dialing in from in the comments or in the chat. I can see we have people who are watching on 2 different Facebook pages, on YouTube and on LinkedIn. So here we are. Okay, we don't have a lot of time. Tracy has already wasted like 10 minutes. Not wasted, but let's dive in. How did the Ujima Ministry begin, and what does Ujima mean anyway?
Well, I'm going to jump in right there. Ujima started way before the official name called Ujima. And that was just, but Ujima is a Yoruba word, and it means collective work and responsibility. It's all about building community. It recognizes that there are no silos in community, and that if one person has a problem, we all have a problem. So it is a principle, and because we stand on principle, we love that we can use this word Ujima and invite the entire community to help build an inclusive community. And as I said, before the word actually came around, even before I came into being as part of CSA, Dr. Georgia Prescott was doing the work of gathering with other people and engaging other people in the community so that we would have a church where everyone belongs.
Yeah, and I love that. No matter what you call it, right? No matter what you call it, the ministry is showing up in action, right? And then people gather. So the viewers are at a little bit of a disadvantage because I have to remember that I know of so many things that you all have done, and some of them I've participated in. But let's give the viewers a snapshot, maybe 4 or 5 of the initiatives that you have sponsored or hosted, and how did you choose to do those particular things?
Well, the person who probably works the hardest is Gretchen, Jung, and has a lot of projects. So I'm going to let her take it from here.
Wow. Actually, I only have 6 projects.
Oh, only 6
currently, but I'm sure somebody will find me another one. Currently, I'm involved in something called Sacramento Act, which is Sacramento Congregations Together, which tries to do exactly what you were talking about, Tracy. In addition, I run a social justice book group. I am also part of the local chapter of Coming to the Table, which is a national organization around racial healing. I run a social justice film group. What else do I do? I've forgotten.
You support the 100 Conversations?
Yes. Monthly, we do the 100 Conversations. I also support whatever these other 2 are into. The biggest thing was during COVID when we did a 21-day equity challenge that worked out quite well.
Yeah. Yes, and that is just I love that you said, well, I'm involved in this and I'm representing here and I'm doing this, and almost everything, like the book group and the film group, they are ongoing, right? And then when there is a class happening or a series that's happening, that you're right there as well. So, talk about 100 conversations about racism, because that started a while ago. It's not one of the very first things, but
there are a group of cards which are called 100 Conversations About Anti-Racism. Let's see, can I show you those? No, not
yeah.
there. You
Yeah.
go. And we pick a couple of cards out of that. Reverend Brynde and I do this together. And then we invite people to come and talk about those in affinity groups. People of color in one group, undermelanated people like me in another. And we have these intense discussions about the things that are asked in the cards.
How about can you just pull a card so people who haven't seen the deck of cards, or pull a couple? What kinds of prompts are on the cards?
Well, the first one I came up with says, "Why is it so uncomfortable to talk about race?"
Right. And and then you get people in the room actually answering that question.
Answering that question
Yeah.
and listening to each other, which is also a big deal.
Oh, I don't know. You expect people to listen to others?
It would be nice.
What is up with that?
I know. Radical idea.
Yeah, that's a very powerful deck. And I'm glad that you all are still having hosting those conversations. So, Dr. Georgia, I'm going to come over to you. And of all the things that you all have done, hosted, facilitated, experienced, I'm going to keep talking for a minute after I tell you the question, because you're going to have to go through the Rolodex in your mind. What one or two have been your favorite, either because they taught you the most, or you had the most fun doing it, or you were surprised? I don't know what will raise it to that level, but what one or two things, programs, activities have really stood out for you, and why?
Well, I think one of them was the 21-day conversations. That was amazing, and there were so many backup resources for us that I really learned a lot in those. And the other is Michael Harriot's book, Black AF History, was just eye-opening to me. And we're starting a new book called Emotional Justice, and it's just as eye-opening in a different way. So those are three things that have worked well. But mostly all of the stuff that we've done has worked really well. There's been one or two things that have, I don't know what I was thinking, but other than that, everything is going pretty well. I will tell you, for leaders of churches who are on the call right now, the most important thing is to set your intention and then find leaders in your congregation or outside of your congregation, if you don't have them yet, to begin to lead. The truth is that we are as successful in our inclusivity as we are because of Brynde, Lambert, and another woman named Rhonda.
Youngblood.
Youngblood. Who very early in my ministry in Sacramento, because that's the only ministry I've had, came in and were very pointed about this is working and this is definitely not working. I don't know where you got this music, but put it away. It's not working here. And if you want to have an inclusive church, this is not doing it. So, and they would work with me on sermons. And, I came from a Catholic background. So when people would call out from the congregation, it would just stifle me. I would just be shell shocked. I wouldn't know what to do. And they worked with me on that and even more. So the really critical thing is to get people in place that represent folks that you want to see in the church. And My board, I always say this, my board was by intention, not by default, by design, not by default. And when you have a design board, it means that you go out and you find people that represent the folks you want in the church, not necessarily the folks who are in the church. And people would come to me and say, "Oh, we want the best people." And I'd say, "I'm giving you the best people. Just, we've got the best people now." So those are some of the things that have worked out. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I've ever shared this story, at least with the three of you. So the very first time that I visited CSA, I was in Sacramento on business. I was speaking at a state conference that was in Sacramento. And I was like, oh, there's got to be a New Thought church. Let me, see what New Thought churches are here. Because at that point, this was way before I ever met you, Dr. Georgia, or either of the other of you. And so there was a Unity, and then right. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to CSA. I'm going to see what they're all about. And Georgia Prescott was not there. It was a weekday. It was a Wednesday night, I think, Wednesday or Thursday night service. But it was clear it was a regular service. And I was blown away because I didn't expect in Sacramento to walk into an environment where I was going to hear some gospel music and some African music, and some people had Afrocentric clothing, and there were white people, and there were brown people, and there were Black people. And I was like, wait, this was not what I expected, but I'm so grateful that I came, and the energy was fabulous and the message was on target. And I was just like, like in an alternate universe, it felt like, from what I expected in Sacramento. So that made me a fan, like right away. And I don't know, I must have had a taxi or something, because I wasn't driving that night, and I was glad I wasn't driving. I was so blown away.
Yeah.
So I love that you just shared some, like if you're a leader, that you really do need to not only set an intention, but then you need to find others who can deliver on that intention, who can represent that intention. And so thanks for sharing that. Any other tips that come to mind, Brynde or Gretchen, that you want people to begin thinking about?
Let me just jump in real quick before they do. And the other part of that, in addition to intention and finding the people, is resisting the resistance from folks who are already in the church. For instance, I for years only allowed men to read the sacred reading, and women, especially lesbians, would come up and they would just, knock me around about it. And I would say, look, you know what? I am trying to let men know that they're part of this church and they're part of the leadership of this church, because we're a very female-dominated podium. So, yeah, that would be the other thing.
I go ahead and add what has really been on my heart has been belonging, because we talk a lot about diversity and inclusion and equity. But belonging takes a whole different intentionality and a intentional consciousness. As when you talked about walking into the room and being met with this experience, that makes people feel like they can belong. Mm-hmm. And what I'm noticing now is we seem to be getting more and more divisive. I have been noticing that people are wearing political messages on their shirts to church. And while I honor everybody's choices, belonging means that we walk in with our values. And we strive at making the experience. We feel like everyone has something to contribute to it. If we create something and something is missing, we want you to find us and let us know, to keep the communication open. And a lot of times people will say, well, leadership is intimidating, or what does my little opinion matter? But when you find an area that is not speaking to your belonging in the community, that is how we spread love. That is how we open hearts. And so I just am very passionate right now about us belonging and building community from that aspect.
Yeah, that's beautiful and so important. Gretchen, any top of mind?
Well, I'm going to piggyback off of that and talk a little bit about community. I'm the newest member of this trio. I've only been with CSA for about 8 years now. And I came because I wanted community to do social justice work. And I have found that community there. And what is lovely about our church is how inclusive it is and how people walk in for the first time and are met by friendliness and a sense of, you count, you need to be here, we're glad you showed up.
And one thing you cannot fake is authentic community.
Right.
Right. You can have some things in place. You can even say we're a loving community, but if I come in and I don't feel the love and I don't see the love happening among people who already know each other, and then if I don't feel welcomed, it's like it's just words. So you all have definitely walked your talk. Georgia Prescott mentioned the book study related to Michael Harriot's book. And I do want you all to share a little bit about that, the structure of it and what the feedback was, because I think it's a model that others could replicate or could build from. And it's not a very typical model. So who wants to take on, how did you structure it? What was it? What was some of the feedback?
Go ahead, Brynde.
Well, it was pretty much structured. A lot of the structure came from 100 Conversations and the work that we have done with that. Understanding that most of the learning happens in conversation. Most of the learning happens in communication. And so our model was for each one to teach one, and for the what's called hard work to really become heart work. And so we loved Michael Harriot's the Black AF history, the unwhitewashed history of America, because it was packed full of information and told from a non-white narrative. And when you're working on toward racial healing, it's important that the other narratives are the ones that are spoken into the room. We also were fortunate, because we are a spiritual community, to keep it based in principle, keep it based in love. And so, and keep the intentionality as healing, not learning, but healing. Any Gretchen or Georgia, what would you like to add?
Well, I think it was important that we brought in contributors that weren't from our community, and some of them not even from our denomination, to share their opinion. We assigned a chapter to each person. Tracy, you were lovely to come on with one of the chapters, and I think that helped. And then the fact that we broke it into a group of global majority folks and white folks, I think was also helpful. Yeah.
I also think that working in small groups is very helpful. People say things when you're 4 or 5 that they will not say to 10 people.
Right.
Yeah. So say a little bit more about, I'm surprised that we're in 2024 and all the people who have done so much work, and still there is a discomfort with or a questioning of affinity groups. Having people who are white talk with people who are white, having people who are from the global majority or people of color be in a group together, or Black people and brown people, and right. So why do you continue to do that?
I'll go for that one,
Okay,
if I
ahead.
may.
Yeah.
We continue to do that because it's a form that we believe in. I believe, that white people will say things to other white people that they will not say when there are people of color around. And I'm sure the same is true for people of color. For people of color, I think it is healing to be in groups where white people aren't present, so you don't have to code switch, and so you can just be real. For white people, I think there's a possibility of great learning from other white people. And that's one of the feedbacks that we get. No, I want to be in the other group and hear what they're saying. Well, you need first to listen to what you're saying and how it might be harmful to others.
Yeah, so it's that we need to do our own work, and we have these opportunities to go deeper, whether it's for healing or for learning. I mean, I'm just kind of feeding back some of what I heard you say. And that also, that's just a part of the time. So there is some cross fertilization and sharing. And we've got some comments in the chat that are really great. And going back to Brynde, what you said about belonging, it actually does take things to another level. And welcome, Deanne. Good to see you on the show. Stumbled onto this conversation, and giving and receiving feedback are definitely advanced skills. And I often start the relationship with, here's how I expect us to be with each other, then include grace, and I want permission to revisit any topic. So these are great reminders when we have these kinds of skills, and then we go to use them. And then especially in tough conversations or challenging conversations, like conversations about the impact of race. And then Deanne also adds, hard work becomes heart work. Yes. And yes, small groups. Hard work becomes heart work. Yes, yes, yes. And Deanne, I just ask you to forgive me if I forget to credit you for that when I use it in the future. Hard work is the foundation for hard work. They can be both in the same. So I'm going to ask this question in spite of the fact that I heard Georgia say earlier that for the most part, you've experienced success and growth, and And even when it's not success, there's growth. But I do always like to ask the question, has there been something where it's like, what were we thinking? Or we thought this was going to turn out this way, and it kind of, that didn't happen. But what, like, is there an example that comes to mind? And then what did you learn from it? Because in that sense, there's a lesson that we can learn that someone else won't have to learn the hard way.
Yeah, well, one of them that comes to mind is there's this thing called the Season for Nonviolence, in which we were participating every year, and I decided that I would end the season with a motorcycle ride, and I would invite Dykes on Bikes, and there was a black group of motorcycle guys, the brothers, and the Hells Angels. I invited them, and 3 or 4 other groups that I knew about that were motorcycle clubs. And I used, back in the day, way back in the day, I used to ride a bike. So I thought, oh, this will be great. And we were going to have a big afterwards, and it was lovely. Well, much to my surprise, a lot of them from those groups came. And what I was also surprised is then it became very competitive. Instead of community building, it was more of a race, not a ride. And so there were lots of hard feelings. 2 women dumped their bikes and had to be taken to the hospital. Oh, it was a big mess. And I thought to myself, what the hell were you thinking? So that didn't work out so well, but it was an interesting idea. I don't know. Other ones, Brynde, do you remember some things that didn't work?
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons we do affinity circles is because we tried, let's just get in the room and all talk together. Yeah. And what we learned from that is the trauma that affects us all. Mm-hmm. And how deep that trauma is, and how unconscious most of us, not even most of us, how unconscious we can be at times about how wounded we are.
Yeah.
And so that was a hard thing to admit, because especially as spiritual folks, we got it all together. We don't have those problems. Those issues, we've already visited those issues and we're healed from them. And I like to think of the waters that we swim in as a broken leg and you're still walking on it. And so it's because of the injuries that we've done to each other, that I have personally inflicted on other folks, and my unhealed stuff, that I can tell you that unless you're very skillful and very knowledgeable and very wise, and even then,
yeah, I was just about to say, I'm very knowledgeable, I'm very skilled, I'm very wise, I'm very experienced in these kinds of conversations. And even then, right, with groups I'm a member of or the community I'm a part of, that I don't intend harm, and or I don't intend to react.
Yes.
But I do both, just because those are the conversations, that's the effect of being in real-time conversation and relationship with people. So we can be very skilled and still, I think the big difference is, one, I'll notice it faster because I do the work, and biggest difference is if someone does give me feedback or there is an issue, I have the skills to go in, right? Let's talk about it. Let's heal this. Oh, let's figure out, let's make it not happen again. Whereas for most people, they will just avoid, or ignore, or leave and leave without letting anybody know that there was a problem.
Yeah.
So very cool. So, I already said, I think the model that you've used for some of your book studies, and most recently the Black AF history with Michael Harriot, I do think it is a masterful model. So I want you to tell people about their opportunity that will be coming up in August, September, October to experience that model for themselves by diving in, experience the model for themselves by dialing into the book Emotional Justice. So we're not going to be done. I want to stick this in here. And then I want to do some closing conversation. So who wants to talk about emotional justice and what's coming up?
Sure. Emotional Justice, A Roadmap for Racial Healing is the book that we'll be using for our next class. We're very excited about it. We will actually have an introductory class that happens this Sunday, coming up this Sunday. And you can sign up at CSASacramento.org. Just those initials, CSASacramento.org. This book is written by Esther Ama, and who introduces us to a radical and different way of dealing with healing racial trauma and building community. She says that there are roles for everyone to participate in, and they're not the same. And so it fits so well with the model that we've already started to build, that what we believe will unfold, or the outcome of this, will be a stronger community, a more inclusive community, and a community that dissolves boundaries. And again, its emphasis is, especially with Esther's book, is on healing racial trauma. Who would like to add?
I would just add that it's really important for white people to know that we have experienced trauma, absolute trauma around racism in this country. I'm just on fire. I was on fire for Michael Harriot's book because I always thought I understood structural racism. I didn't. I had no idea what structural racism was until I read that book. And I had no idea about white-centered speech until I read this book, Emotional Trauma. And it has been such an eye-opener for me. It's absolutely like somebody turned on a light. It's an amazing concept and an amazing book. So I think the model that we've come up with, and Brynde and I met for many, many months about this model. And I'm glad that you liked it, because we think it's really a good one too.
Yeah, I can say by my own experience and observation of the model that one of the reasons I think it's so masterful is because, one, you do take the time in every session or some time to remind people why we're here and how we're going to work together. Two, that there is the commonality and having different voices speak to the chapters in the book is great. 3, that model of having people then go into small groups, even though I'm one of the people who are like, I love affinity groups. And then I want to go from the affinity groups into a mixed group so that we can have some exchange. But even without that, like the power and the impact. And when I hear people in the small groups saying, hey, I would not say this if this group had people from, other people in it, because I feel safe. And isn't that what we want? We want people to take steps to create something new, but we want them to feel safe as they are stretching.
And that safety is largely thanks to Gretchen and her circle keepers, who she's trained so well, that makes it safe.
Yeah.
I'd like to add and ask Gretchen to step in, because one of the things that we do use is the circle process. And if Gretchen can explain just a little bit about what that is.
Sure. Do we have time, Tracy?
We do, yes.
Okay. Circle process is indigenous based. It has been used on this continent for a very long time, but I'm sure it has been used on all continents in the beginning. The circle process is about community and about making the community whole. So in circle, everybody has a chance to speak, but we don't do crosstalk. We don't argue with each other. We just tell our stories. And most of all, we listen to the stories of others. There is a talking piece, which is very indigenous in this country, that we pass around the group to show who has the power to speak at that moment, but more importantly, who has the power to listen. And it is this combination of sharing, speaking and listening, talking from your own perspective, that helps build community and helps people talk about things that they perhaps have not talked about before.
Beautiful. And it definitely does work. So, yes, our time is winding down. And here's the question. Still today, I get people saying to me things like, I don't even know why you keep bringing this topic up. Like, we're spiritual, and all of that stuff about racism is political. So, what do you say to people who are spiritually grounded, who are part of spiritual communities, who I was going to say are in denial, but that's a judgment, who simply don't understand why this work is spiritual and how important it is for us if we want to create heaven on earth and live our spiritual principles. So, what do you say to people?
Well, more and more for me, I try and draw a conversation into why they think it's political, and I think from that moment we can begin a conversation to help people understand it's not. And I also, I love to say this. I've said it for 22 years. Unless you have authentic oneness, you don't have oneness. And so this whole idea of we are one is, it's holding us back. It's holding us back. Yeah.
I agree. I think, and I feel so blessed to be able to now not convince someone of that, but to actually get curious and say, tell me more about that. Tell me what you're thinking. And as Dr. Georgia said, and have the conversation begin there.
And Gretchen, you said earlier that you were looking for a community where you could also do your social justice work. So how is spirituality and social justice combined in your mind and heart?
Yes, Gretchen, tell us about that.
Okay, so I came to this church as an atheist, and I'm still an atheist. However, social justice is my passion. And Georgia tells me that that makes me a spiritual person, and I have great respect for her, so I accept that.
Good.
But it's sort of a different spirituality, okay? The thing is that we can't have oneness. We can't have the world that I want to envision without social justice. It's as simple as that. And for that reason, I continue to stay in this church, even though I know that makes both of the parents roll in their graves that I'm going to a church, and have been and supported financially for 8 years now.
Fair enough. And really, I am honestly curious. I ask that question a lot because, in what comes up for me a lot is like what Dr. Petra Weldes said that I quoted and made a chapter in my book. Are you listening with political ears or spiritual ears? And so if we believe in love and harmony and unity, and Gretchen, you just said something that I have said and believed a lot. I don't do this as quote unquote an ally for some other group. I do the work and have the conversations because I want to be actively engaged in creating the kind of world I want to live in. Mm-hmm. So I'm not an ally for LGBTQ plus people. I want to live in a world where LGBTQ plus people have the same opportunities, experiences, and that I have. And I think for all of us, if we are saying this is how the world was designed to be, and I want to be actively engaged in helping to create that, then yes, whether we call it spiritual or not, it's way beyond the idea of political values and power. I want to thank all three of you for saying yes and coming and hanging out with me. This is already one of my favorite shows ever. And I'm going to watch it again where I can just take it all in. So thanks very much. And maybe we'll come back together after this next book and see how that went and what came out of the experience.
Sounds great. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And everybody else, I just want to remind you that we're here every Tuesday at noon Mountain Time on the New Thought Media Network, talking about what we can do in order to create, sustain, and expand inclusive churches in our communities. My name is Tracy Brown, and I'll see you again next week.
Thanks for watching The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Join us again next week at 12 noon Mountain Time.